Hello, dear friend. Thank you for hanging out with a couple of multiples today. We are your hosts, Drew
and Garden System. We are a married couple that both have dissociative identity disorder, or DID.
The reality of living with multiplicity is nothing like what you might see in the movies or on soap operas. This mental health condition often goes unnoticed, even by mental health professionals. Did you know that someone with DID spends an average of 6 to 12 years in the mental health system before receiving a correct diagnosis? This is because there is still a prevailing belief, even among clinicians, that DID is rare. The truth is that there are around 120 million people all over the world that meet the criteria according to the DSM-5.
We are glad that you are here to learn all about dissociative identity disorder. Whether you are someone living with multiplicity, a supporter, or a mental health professional, you are making a difference by choosing to listen to this podcast today. You can help dispel myths about DID and help spread awareness by sharing this podcast with a friend or loved one.
Please visit acoupleofmultiples.com and sign up for our mailing list to learn all about our private paid community called Hearts Multiplied on the Circle platform. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review. And for our Apple listeners, we would really appreciate you leaving us a written review.
Together, we can make a difference by taking the disorder out of dissociative identities. We are honored to have a Gold Plus sponsor for Season 2.
The Institute for Creative Mindfulness is one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, founded and directed by Dr. Jamie Pless-Marich, author of Dissociation Made Simple. Dr. Jamie is the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural, and since 2015, she's offered the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We have never felt more accepted and validated as a multiple than when we were able to show up authentically as Garden System for our basic EMDR training. Having lived experience is valued and respected in these training courses.
Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers.
Are you interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send an email to admin@acoupleofmultiples.com to request more information.
Welcome, magnificent multiples, stupendous supporters, and crazy, creative, caring clinicians. All of you out there, our dear listeners, to our phenomenal first episode of Season 2. The crowd erupts with cheers
Woo-hoo!
and applause. We are your hosts, Drew
and Garden System,
a couple of multiples,
living our best lives under one roof.
We both have full-time careers, are raising 4 teenagers,
and have a dog, 4 cats, 3 fish tanks,
and an electric blue crawfish named Aurora. She's super neato. Yeah, Garden System named her.
'Cause Aurora wears a blue dress, but then pink because the fairies are fighting. And sometimes the crawfish changes from blue to red, but we want it to stay blue, so she's just like Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty.
Anyway, to start this first episode and season off, where our goal is to primarily talk in depth about internal communication, I think we need to go back to when we first figured out that this DID diagnosis may be fit. Except it wasn't as simple as that, because there's a lot of questioning that goes on. Denial, and I'm making this all up, and then back to maybe, I really is a we? Are we? To this does feel like a relief to finally have words for what this is that we are experiencing. Well, I think we should tell our personal stories, wifey. I mean, every person's story is different, but the question is always the same. Do I have DID?
Yes, this was a question we pondered over and over again, and even convinced ourselves that we didn't have DID. When we first started seeing our current therapist, we told her quite emphatically in our first session that we did not have DID. For us, at least, we didn't really understand that what we were doing in our head was internal communication.
So, what was it that you were doing? Please describe.
Well, for one, we had these memories in our head that did not belong to us. We kept seeing these pictures of things that were happening to this little girl, only we didn't recognize the little girl or anyone else in the memory at all.
They weren't your memories, and you didn't know who you were seeing or why. That must have felt confusing. What did you make of it?
Oh, we immediately dove into things like researching having a past life, reincarnation, and even pondered with the idea that memories from an ancestor had somehow passed down into our brain. There was such a denial that we had experienced abuse that it never occurred to us that the little girl was in fact me.
Do you believe now that seeing these pictures of your little self in your mind was a way for her to communicate with you? Do you think it was intentional?
Oh, it was definitely intentional. We just didn't know it at first. Daisy, our little, wanted all of us to very much see and know about these memories. When we were finally aware of being a we could see her in our internal world, holding the memories, like one might hold a crystal ball, and she would hold it up for anyone and everyone to see on the inside.
What do you think she wanted from sharing? Why do you think she wanted to share?
This is a great question and a tough one, too. I know she wanted to be seen. She very much wanted her story known and told. As a registered mental health counselor intern, I see a lot of clients that are unable to recognize the fact that they were indeed abused. I think that when trauma and chaos is the norm in your home, you are unable to see just how much you've been affected by the ongoing trauma. I mean, we were showing up with all the symptoms of depression, anxiety, the suicidal ideation, self-harm, and vehemently proclaiming what a great and fabulous childhood we had. And it just wasn't true.
Right. So do you think Daisy showing you these pictures of her and what happened in your mind is the reason you figured out that you indeed have DID?
Well, looking back, it really was the first sign that something was up. I mean, you just don't have memories of other people, but it was so hard to believe what I was seeing. I didn't actually remember that happening to me, so how could that memory be real?
How did you figure out that little girl was a part of you?
It was a long journey of acceptance. Accepting that the only reasonable explanation was that the little girl was me. The more I tried not to listen, the louder she became. The pictures became more frequent. The pictures became bigger. And we had to let go of the fairy tale stories we told about our childhood. When you realize that someone did hurt you when you were a very young child, there is this soul-crushing weight that makes you question everything you've ever known.
I have felt that weight too, after the soul-crushing realization that I had done nothing to deserve what had happened to me. I tried to blame myself for years. If only I'd been better. But my heart knew I had not deserved it. No one deserves it. It's that grief and sadness and then anger one goes through that eventually leads to the acceptance that this happened, and what one does have control over is the choice to do the healing work, taking the power back bit by bit.
Absolutely. The choice to do the healing work is a powerful one. And that's really what internal communication is. It's doing the healing work internally. We have a choice to start listening to all of ourselves and hearing their stories. When you look back now, what were some of the first signs or ways that all of you were trying to communicate with each other?
Well, when the body was about 12, 13 years old, we were in the midst of our eating disorder. I didn't yet realize it, But the reason my eating problems were so complicated and problematic for me was because I had parts. I did not know about them, but I found evidence I didn't remember. I was trying to lose weight and be as thin as possible. Yet, I was finding wrappers and empty food containers, and my mom was saying I'd eaten this or that when I had no memory of it. I was furious that she was accusing me of eating stuff I hadn't eaten, but nothing was adding up. I had no siblings. My dad didn't lie about the cookies he ate, so the only logical answer was that I was doing it, but had no memory of it. I had so much self-hatred, and that is when my head started getting loud. It was the noise, all the talking that was first very noticeable to me, and outside people telling me I had done or said things that I had no memory of.
Being accused of lying or being told we had said things was another early sign. We remember being told that we were too young to have those kinds of memory problems. The memory problems, the accusations of lying, are all signs of a lack of internal communication.
Well, and the stumper of it all is, how do you know you're supposed to be communicating with someone if you don't even know they are there? For me, parts weren't showing me pictures in my head of the abuse. I heard talking that wasn't me talking. They weren't my thoughts or my voice. Honestly, at such a young age, I thought this is what hearing voices was like. I thought I was going nuts. I thought I had schizophrenia, but I didn't tell anyone back then. Schizophrenia is another highly stigmatized diagnosis that often is the butt of jokes. And I was uneducated about it and just knew I didn't want people thinking badly of me.
Yeah, this is what happens when the public doesn't know or understand and the movies think that their portrayals are educational. I'm so glad we are able to have these conversations and shed light on the truth about these mental health disorders. Hearing voices is a common trauma response, and no one wants to tell their therapist or psychiatrist that they hear them because they are afraid of being diagnosed with schizophrenia. I think it would be great to have a much needed conversation about schizophrenia at some point. But the point here is that some people can hear their parts talking to them. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It means heightened awareness and that communication is happening.
And ultimately, communication between parts of a system is what leads to healing and functionality.
Tell our fine friends more about what it is like to hear voices as a person with DID.
Well, for me, it was confusing for a long time. The voices are not heard like you hear the television or a friend talking to you on the outside. The voices are internal, from the inside, like when you're thinking to yourself. But the difference is, it does not feel like I'm hearing my own thoughts. It feels like I'm hearing someone else talking because they aren't my thoughts or words. They are another one of my parts. So for a while, I thought this is what it was like to hear voices because there were many different voices. And even though I couldn't hear them with my ears, like I would listening to another person talking on the outside, the voices in my parts sound, quote, loud to me because they are many and aren't mine and often conflict with my own thoughts and opinions. I think the best words to describe the experience of DID voices are overwhelming, confusing, and loud.
We can really relate to the overwhelming and confusing part for sure. We never called them voices, as we didn't hear them in the same way we heard outside people talk. For us, we sometimes attributed the voices to religious teachings, like either God or an angel or some other spiritual being was talking to us. Although we were also in such strong denial about hearing these voices, which we really just called thoughts, we would also forget that we heard them. If a therapist asked us if we heard voices, we would just laugh and say no. It wasn't until we looked back and thought about it after our diagnosis that we were able to identify our experiences.
I think it's interesting talking to people with lived experience with DID and the varied experiences and awareness of their others. So we've talked about pictures parts can show us in our minds of memories and experiences they hold that we might not be aware of, and also hearing parts of ourselves, kind of like thoughts internally that don't feel like our own. I'm thinking of other ways our others communicate with us, and the thing that comes to mind is finding things around the house that we don't have memory of. This can be new items that were bought, or art that was done that we don't remember doing, or writing that is found, but there is no memory of writing. I think all of these things can be looked at as communication of what a part likes or doesn't like, or what they remember.
Journaling was one of the first ways we were able to start communicating intentionally. Our parts most definitely communicated by writing in our journal, as evidenced by the many different handwritings that would show up when we would go back and read them. We didn't always have complete amnesia for the writing, though. Often we felt very dissociated while writing and kind of had that sense of, it's not me writing.
I think it's important to talk about the levels of amnesia. Could we use the word spectrum here? Like amnesia is on a spectrum? The amount you do or don't remember at any given time seems to vary when you have lived experience with DID. For example, sometimes I'm entirely aware of my others. We talk with each other in my head and sometimes out loud and decide things together and experience things together. This is called co-consciousness. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. I have no memory of doing or saying something, but someone on the outside, a friend, starts talking about an event that I don't even remember happening. And then sometimes the experience falls somewhere in between, like Garden System was sharing. You are dissociated. It doesn't feel like you are really there, but you are semi-aware of what is happening. But it's most likely not you fronting. You are watching one of your others doing, saying, or experiencing something.
We really do believe it is a spectrum. Not everyone experiences complete blackout amnesia for switching. There are a lot of varying degrees of knowing and not knowing when you are switching. In the beginning, there is usually less awareness of how dissociated or how present you might be. And for us, we often have amnesia for our amnesia. We even once argued with our therapist and told her that we never lost time, to which she promptly started sharing all the gaps that we experienced. Our first awareness of lost time didn't occur until just 3 years ago, and that's after having our diagnosis for about 4 years at the time. Sometimes I think our other selves would allow some awareness for the rest of us when they were fronting because it was easier to show us than to tell us. Just talking isn't the only way to communicate, and that's true for all of ourselves.
Right. I've heard from many people with DID that do not hear their others or talk to them. And many people with DID also do not see their others in their mind. They do not visualize them or cannot visualize them or in an internal landscape or world where their others reside. I'm guessing most of these systems discover they are a we from outside observers and what is said to them about what is happening, and them realizing they have no memory of events or things they have said or done that have apparently happened.
That goes back to what you were saying about finding things you don't remember buying or things you don't remember doing. Evidence of others being out and leaving things is another way ourselves will try to connect. We used to be on a lot of different medications to try and treat things like anxiety and depression, but we didn't really like taking the medicine. One day we came into the kitchen and our pills were everywhere. Out of the bottle, down the sink. It looked like someone was having a temper tantrum.
Someone probably was trying to tell you that they did not want to take those pills. What did you do?
Well, long term, we were able to get off all the medications. We worked hard with our therapist to find other ways to cope. You do have to be careful with medications, though, and follow your psychiatrist's instructions, because it is dangerous to stop these kinds of medications cold turkey. But that's actually what ended up happening with us. We decided we didn't want them and stopped taking them, and we didn't tell anyone for a good 3 to 4 months. My therapist was not thrilled that I kept it a secret. And again, don't do what we did. It's not safe.
Yeah. Learn all the things not to do right here on a couple of multiples. Yeah, because honestly, I did the exact same thing. I couldn't stand the meds prescribed to me, so I just stopped taking them. I've heard many people that have found psych meds to be very helpful for symptoms, and other people like Garden System and I that found the side effects, and for me personally, the way they felt like they messed with my brain, really off-putting. I wanted to figure out other ways to cope with my symptoms. What we are telling you to do is please keep communicating with those helping you. your therapist, and your psychiatrist. Like our system said, it can be dangerous to just stop medication, especially if you are in a bad place already.
Yes, exactly. My therapist would have been in a much better place to help me had she known that I was stopping my medicine. It can feel really scary to talk about medication and its side effects and to have the conversation about whether or not you have to take them.
Yes, because for some people, there really isn't a choice. For some people, medication is necessary and or helpful.
Exactly. We are not doctors and we are not your doctors. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations with your provider. For us, we were terrified that no one would support us with the idea of stopping and that we'd get in trouble for not taking them. So we just didn't tell. But I learned that my therapist would have been there for me and supported me if only I had told her. Well, that was a little bit of a rabbit trail on internal communication, but yeah, sometimes your other selves will do things like trying to flush pills down the sink, and you have to explore the reasons why. What are they trying to tell everyone?
Right. And I think it's important to remember that many of your others might be experiencing different symptoms than you. Maybe one is severely depressed or even suicidal, and maybe you or someone else inside doesn't feel those ways at all. I think it's crucial to realize that all of your other symptoms and feelings need to be addressed for the good of all of you as a whole. And ignoring even the little ways parts try to communicate that things aren't all good for them can lead to a lot of internal and external chaos. Sometimes it's scary when parts leave evidence that not all is well for them, and it's easy to try to push it aside because it doesn't feel like it's yours.
There was a long period of acceptance of the other selves and their communication. It is easy to dismiss, deny, and even totally miss the ways that everyone is communicating. A lot of the internal experiences can feel so surreal that we just don't acknowledge them. For example, Leanna, one of our selves that is a fictive, was one that we often called on to help us. Yet it didn't click that she was a dissociative identity even when we were first learning all about DID. We would often ask her, hey, come and help us do XYZ, but then it was like we would forget she existed.
I relate with dismissing, denying, and totally missing the ways that my parts were trying to communicate with me in the beginning. Before I knew we were a system. For years, the hatred for myself kept on building, and my eating disorder in my teens got worse and worse. As soon as I started to get to know the part of myself that was eating, because I was starving us, things slowly started getting better for us. And I realized that my efforts to be thin were triggering memories from my others of being denied food when we were younger. When I stopped and listened to my others and what was really going on and began to ask questions and form friendships with them, we have been able to work out an eating plan that all of us can live with. Our self-hatred has slowly turned into respect and love for ourselves, and getting there was all about our intentional efforts to communicate with each other and learn why parts behaved or thought certain ways.
The earliest voices or thoughts that we remember as not being ours were highly critical voices that were fueled with a lot of self-hatred. It looked a lot like self-sabotage even, as there was another self that was attempting to stop the rest of us. There was so much fear and anger, and it came out in a slew of internal insults. When I first tried describing this to a therapist, they just sort of interpreted it as my inner critic voice that everyone has.
Yes, that's what happened to me too. My therapist at the time had me work on, quote, negative self-talk. But that didn't stop anything. In fact, I think it probably made those parts of me feel invalidated.
It is invalidating. The thing it is and it is not negative self-talk. While all of my selves are me, it is also not me. So it's one of us insulting another one of us. So it is not self-directed because it is not directed at themselves, but another one of us.
Yes. It is more like having a disagreement or a misunderstanding with another person, and also a reaction to another part's behavior or choices. It's like having a family and the family members interacting with each other and disapproving of each other's choices or ways of doing things. So it's all about learning to talk with each other and making compromises instead of insulting each other and fighting.
Bingo! Like one of ourselves, Vivian, doesn't think poorly of herself. She thinks poorly of the rest of us. So saying positive affirmations isn't exactly helpful in this scenario. If Vivian were to say them, it doesn't stop her from insulting the rest of us. If the rest of us were to say them, it doesn't stop Vivian from insulting us. The key was getting Vivian to appreciate the rest of us and to be kind to all of the selves she shared the body with.
There were parts of my system before we did a lot of healing work that would not agree to have a conversation or to, quote, work things out or make compromises. These parts of my system were introjects, which are internal parts or representations of outside people that were involved in my abuse when I was younger. I'm thinking of my part that was called the voice. He would slew insults at all of us. He was all about power and control and instilling fear to make us act and do things in a certain way. Until we were able to take back our power, which required us to realize that this internal representation of one of our original abusers wasn't more powerful than all of us working together, this required all of us to combine our strengths and assist each other. He was only powerful over us as a system that was divided.
Excellent point. Not all the voices we hear are actual other selves inside. Sometimes they are just the introjects of abusers.
They can feel really scary. Anyway, continue.
Yes. They really are scary. It can be confusing to differentiate a new self from, say, the critical voice that Leanna has, which is different from the critical voice Keelara has. And if you're new to our podcast, Leanna and Keelara are two selves within us that often front. We talk more about them in season 1. It's pretty complicated to be a we. Also, in the beginning, it is hard to realize that you are sharing this body and this life with a whole host of others, and each one will often feel like they should be in charge. This leads to one self trying to be the one out all of the time and trying to suppress the others. Sometimes this works, but in our experience, it only leads to others instigating a coup and overthrowing whoever is currently dominating time out in the body.
I feel completely called out. Yeah, to this day, we still have trouble with this. Well, it's really me, Lizzie, that has trouble. I'm the one that is most likely out in the body at any given time. I tend to try to be out and stay out in the body so I can control how everything goes because I want it to go a certain way. My way.
We are quite aware. Go on.
Well, I try to be nice when trying to do things my way, mostly. But yeah, this leads to my others feeling unhappy because they don't get time out, because I'm not sharing. I think it's become a bad habit. The original reason why I tried to be out and stay out was so I could have continuous, consistent memory at school and do well. But that's how it became a habit, to hog time out in the body. Not a good habit when you have a system of others that all have strengths. I have learned that sharing time and being present with my others when they're out is really the way to go. And since I have a lot of anxiety and many of my others don't, sharing and being co-conscious lowers my stress and anxiety. Doing everything myself is and has been completely draining.
Sharing is caring.
I'm gonna bite you. But yes, sharing is caring. For those of you that are not aware, I'm a Montessori teacher in a toddler classroom. Toddlers usually do not know how to share and will bite because of it. Did I just say I'm a toddler? Basically.
Sharing isn't always about who is out in the body. Sharing means that all of yourselves know what each one of you all did while they were out in the body. Sharing is internal communication. I think what all of your others can learn, Drew, is that if they want Lizzie to share time out in the body, then they need to make sure Lizzie doesn't have amnesia for the time she's out. Or the time she's not out, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, That is what I hate sometimes when I'm not the one out in the body, that I don't always know what happened while I was not the one there. I think sometimes my others don't want me to know what they're doing or saying because they know I disapprove, and that's why they block me. And other times, I know what they're doing, and I don't want to be a part of it, so I go away. Either way, it's uncomfortable, challenging, and one of the difficulties of being a multiple.
And that, I think, is the hardest yet most important part about internal communication. When you are a we, there is no my way, so to speak. It has to become our way, or there won't be any way for anyone.
Right. It will just be chaos and fighting, dysfunction, unhappiness for all.
Establishing internal communication can be rough, and the denial of being a multiple can be an obstacle in achieving it. I know many other multiples that really struggle hearing from their other selves, and we are going to talk more about that in a future episode. Our very next episode will be featuring Alicia, a dance educator, performer, and choreographer. She has used movement for her own personal recovery from a trauma-induced eating disorder.
Alicia served as the Director of Operations for the Institute for Creative Mindfulness, our Gold Plus sponsor for Season 2. She shares how dance affected her internal world and internal communication. Until next time, thank you for hanging out with A Couple of Multiples.
We are honored to have a Gold Plus sponsor for Season 2.
The Institute for Creative Mindfulness is one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, founded and directed by Dr. Jamie Marich, author of Dissociation Made Simple. Dr. Jamie is the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural, and since 2015, she's offered the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We have never felt more accepted and validated as a multiple than when we were able to show up authentically as Garden System for our basic EMDR training. Having lived experience is valued and respected in these training courses.
Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers.
Are you interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send an email to admin@acoupleofmultiples.com to request more information.
From your host, Drew,
and Garden System.
Thank you for listening to A Couple of Multiples, the reality of dissociative identity disorder. This podcast is intended for educational purposes and is not a replacement for therapy.
Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapeutic relationship with the hosts or any guest speakers.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. We would love to hear what you enjoyed the most.
You can visit our website at acoupleofmultiples.com for additional information, including how to join our new online paid community called Hearts Multiplied, to access additional resources, and to also subscribe to our mailing list to receive future updates.
Remember, you matter and are loved for being all of yous.